Hi Hawthorne Sycamore, I hope you're all okay on this very hot day. I'm going to read the next part of our story from the Skylarks War by Hilary McKay. It's chapter 23, How Do You Spell It? All hyphenated, how do you spell it? So, Peter, Clary wrote, when you said about university for me, did you really mean it? Or were you being nice? I don't know what you mean, being nice, replied Peter rather grumpily. What's the point of pretending you haven't a brain when you have? Obviously, you will have to work, like I do. You can send me your master correct, if you like, and any Latin translations you need looking at. Once you get there, you can earn money tutoring during the holidays, enough to pay for somewhere to live, I should think. If I'm there too, we could share and it would be cheaper. Last week I took the picture you found into Oxford to get it copied, and I ran into someone there who gave me an idea. Vanessa said, You're always inky. Often, but not always, said Clary, delighted to see her friend again. How's Simon? Bothered, said Vanessa, after considering the question. Bothered Boney doesn't speak much. Goes and visits Rupert's Lucy, sits and draws her on the letters he sends. Letters to Rupert? Yes, letters to Rupert. And he reads about the war all the time. He collects those magazines in the Times. Don't say, what magazines? I can see you're just about to. We don't have a newspaper here anymore. They'll have the Times at school. They always did. Look in the library. Oh, Clary, I hate this war, but I sort of love it too. Is that awful? Yes. It's because you're doing something useful, said Clary. Wise Clary, you're right. And I make them laugh, the boys I mean. The boys in the beds, that's what I call them. I kiss them like this. Vanessa kissed 2 fingers and planted them lightly on Clary's nose. Dad's ship was in a battle. He was taken prisoner. Simon knows. Did you hear? No, Clary exclaimed. No, I didn't. Oh, Vanessa, I'm sorry. What do you know? Now, said Vanessa, don't fuss. Are you or are you not a grammar school girl? We don't know anything except he's alive, or was. Don't look like that. Make me weep and I'll slay you, Clary. Do you notice I don't smell of carbolic today? French perfume, that's what. Clary sniffed and asked, Where'd you get it from? Clever Rupert brought it last week when he was back. Clary, you didn't see him. Oh, stupid me and my big mouth. Rupert was back, croaked Clary. Only for a few days, in a very odd mood, couldn't get anything out of him except he'd spent a day in Cornwall and it'd been awful. Clary, don't stare at me like that. Grandmother writes, but she didn't tell me. Perhaps because it had been awful. He would hardly talk, just frantic rushing about on a motorbike with me hanging on the back for dear life. He looked wonderful, so don't worry. Oh, good. Clary, they can't be bothered with family much, the boys in the beds. Well, not can't be bothered, but they don't want the questions and the tears and... Fuss, said Clary. Yes, all right, fussed. Can't bear it. Neither can I. Sorry. Don't talk about Rube. Don't talk about Dad. How's Peter? I do love him. So steady on his wobbly leg. So gorgeous and glum. He and Simon will be leaving school soon. Will he come to speech day with Mum and me? We'll have to clap hard to make up for Dad. Oh, where is he? I went home and Mum was hugging the globe, wailing, fussing. She went to the wrong school, obviously. Now you've made me howl. Vanessa sobbed, drooping against the wall, tears splashing on the brass top. Vanessa sobbed, drooping against the wall, tears splashing on the brass-top table. Then she sniffed, wiped her nose on her sleeve, said, Adore you, Clary. Got to go now. Sorry about Rupert. Love to Peter. Peter the Rock. My lovely dad, a prisoner. Imagine. No, don't. I found some beautiful new shoes for dancing. 4 straps, 2 on the foot and 2 above the ankle. Red patent leather. Shall I teach you how to tango right now? Yes, right now, said Clary immediately. And so they did, up and down the hall and into the musty cold dining room and out back to the front door. And then Vanessa was gone. All right, she cried. And she did. A picture of her new shoes drawn on a postcard. Clary wrote painfully back, dragging the words from the air one at a time and wrenching them grimly onto the paper. Your poor mother worrying. And your dad. I'm glad you could cheer up Rupert. Those shoes, the heels are pretty. Miss Vane says the toes are clean patent with leather with old bread. I hope you spell nice today. Yours unfussingly, Clary. Simon thought that if the only way of being in contact with someone was by words written on paper, then those words must be worth reading and true. For this reason, as often as he could manage, he made the long weekend journey by bicycle and train from school to his great-aunt's cottage in order to check up on Lucy. After Lucy, it was a 9-mile cycle ride to see Clary. Sometimes he stayed the night there, but often he went back to the cottage in the evening, caught a morning train to Oxford, cycled from Oxford to school, and was back for 5 o'clock evening song. This weekend break was called an excellent. There were no excellents granted for those who missed evensong. But Simon never did. He would stand beside Peter, inquire, breathless and exhausted, but with something to write about that night. Dear Rupert, Lucy is very well and has 4 sheep in with her for company. She does not work, but is only on grass, so should be all right. I caught her on Saturday, brushed her down and washed her face. She had curled up her lip and jumped about a bit. She's lost 2 shoes, so we took off the others because she doesn't need them in the field. Clary had Peter's old bike out when I got her to her house. It had a low crossbar because of his stiff legs, so when we got the chain on and the puncture fixed, she could ride it quite well. Next time I go, I'll get there early enough to take her up to see Lucy. The roads are quiet that way, and I make sure she's safe. I took 6 eggs in a knapsack. Her father said good man when he saw them, and said I was welcome to stay the night. He asked about my dad, who was taken prisoner. I told them we had a card, but only a few words. All well around here in how do you spell it? When Clary heard, she jumped and said, "Oh, that's where he is." I know I'd better not write the name, but very good to know. And I didn't stay the night. I went straight back to Mum and my great aunt. I thought Clary was quick to clever to understand, but she said it was your grandfather's old riddle. I wish you all the best, Simon Bonington, Bonners. All well round here in how do you spell it? Clary repeated, "Oh, it's in Constantinople, or near Constantinople, around here. I suppose that means somewhere near. Turkey, goodness." Simon had stared at her astounded. "It's grandfather's joke, his riddle. He used to ask us every summer. Constantinople is a very long word. How do you spell it?" And then we'd try and get muddled, and he would say, "IT, it." Constantinople, repeated Simon, shaking his head. "I saw it on a map last week. It's not terribly far from Troy, Odyssey. Found his way home from there, Simon, through the Greek islands. Dad sailed all around the Greek islands," said Simon, brighteningly, wonderfully. "He used to tell us about it when we were little. They would often see dolphins. I'm going straight back to let Mum know where he is. Thanks, Clary, thank you." "It wasn't me. It was my grandfather." "It was you," said Simon, smiling down at her. It had been wonderful news for Simon to take back to his family. His mother had put down the globe and hauled out an atlas and found herself in a familiar place, the Argan Sea, that she and her husband had sailed years before. "First Odyssey, now your father," she had said. "Now I know he'll come home safe." "I wish I knew Rupert would come home safe," thought Simon. He read over his letter. Was it boring? Would Rupert remember his grandfather's old riddle and understand? Would he care? Simon the Bony One stared into the dark beyond the window, and in his mind he wrote the letter that he would like to send. "Stay safe. There is no border nor battlefield nor empire worth your hurt. I remember your hand on my shoulder those times we sang at school. I looked at the sea yesterday and I felt I could step over it. It didn't look big, it looked small. Only a few weeks now and school will be finished, forever. Good." Chapter 24. More or less content. For Rupert, the first time back in England had been terrible. A huge mistake to go to Cornwall. The questions from his grandparents had been impossible. He'd been so terrified he'd snap and answer them truthfully that he fled after one hideous day. However, he quickly found that everywhere he went afterwards was pretty much the same. The pale, ridiculous English, second-hand heroes, proud of their silly ideals, proud of him too, patting him on the back. Once he had bellowed, "Don't touch me!" and they leaped like they'd been shot. Not that shot people leaped, more crumpled, or blurted out prayers on one of their mothers, or just plain fell apart. Vanessa and her friends had been the best. They'd made very good jokes. He hadn't known girls could be so callous. If he came back again, he'd stick entirely to girls, but he didn't think he'd come home anymore. He preferred France, or Belgium, he couldn't tell the difference. He spent his odd days of leave in towns and villages away from the front. He'd lost his banjo long before, but he got hold of a motorbike again. Some people wrote diaries or sketched, filling book after book. Some wrote poetry. Some had got up a newspaper. Why? He asked, truly baffled at all this papery toil. And they tried to explain that they thought the war needed recording so that people at home knew the truth. Rupert didn't think this was right. Not the truth about the bad things anyway. Not about the gas, for instance, or the way he'd seen people treated when they wouldn't stop crying. He didn't think people at home would want to read stuff like that. He wouldn't. He'd rather never know it. As it was, he blanked it out. Rupert could blank things out almost as if they had never been. A trick he'd learnt at boarding school. He faked it till it was true. Now in France, or it might have been Belgium, he'd managed his greatest blanking of all. He'd unacknowledged the war. He'd found a way to ignore it, and in achieving this, he knew that he'd become safe. Blissfully safe. Disaster-proof. Nothing could hurt Rupert. Explosions rocked the ground around him and left him standing unrifled. Bullets veered away from his head. All the minor problems that beset the others, sickness, bad feet, trembling hands, lice, sleeplessness, panic, bewilderment, grief, all those things did not touch him. He never saw ghosts, he rarely saw rats, he was not bullied, he hated no one. He cheerfully accepted the boredom. Deep mud, irrational orders, and strange tasting tea. He enjoyed cheap red wine, silver flare light, the heat from a mug, the smell of the wool blankets, wood smoke, rum, and comradeship. He liked these things in a detached kind of way, as if he were hardly there. He rarely reads letters from home, and gave away his parcels unopened. He had completely forgotten about how he'd been worried about Lucy the pony and Mina the cat. He stopped counting the time when he stopped counting back to the time he was at school. He never deliberately thought of anyone in England, although once or twice, very rarely, a memory would catch him like a kick in the stomach. Not often, though. He couldn't imagine the war ever ending, and he didn't know what he'd do if it did. It was not something he thought about much. He was, more or less, content. And the next chapter, I think I have to stop there because it's a long chapter, the next chapter, is called Clary, the Dark Horse. So I wonder why they've called her the Dark Horse. Right, I will read the next part of the story for you very soon. I hope you're all staying cool in this weather and staying safe. Bye, Hawthorn and Sycamore. See you very soon.